Okay, this is the pretest for Unit 3, and we sort of regret not putting out a lead-in video to this Unit 3. We knew that Unit 1 with factoring sort of needed a lead-in, and then Unit 2 on rational expressions just sort of couples the ideas of factoring with, of course, multiplication and division and canceling, and with addition and subtraction with finding a common denominator and that sort of thing. So we didn't feel a lead-in was necessary in Unit 2. And the scores reflected that. Scores were very, very good in Unit 2. Looking at the Unit 3 pretest, we have determined that we probably should have done a lead into this. So we're going to take some time to do a couple of videos here and talk about a few things about solving equations and how the uh, the practice skills mean a lot, and working at this daily, doing a little bit of math daily is very important. But you also want to get so you see structure. um, that's the nature of engineering is seeing structure, and it starts at the beginning level in the calculus and threads its way through the program at Clarkson. So we'll be talking about structure too. Number one, real good success rate, something close to 90% here. Um, you've got t divided by 5 equals 3 tenths t plus 7. Different ways you can approach this. Probably uh, many people thinking, okay, I've got a variable t here, I've got a variable t here. I should get those two together, and maybe that's your practiced uh, thing that you learned at the high school level. There might still be others who say, okay, I got a denominator of 5, denominator of 10, and remember a denominator of 1. The 7 is 1. Let me get common denominators for everybody. That might be a practice that you've learned to do. What I'll do is select a greatest common factor between the denominators and a least common multiple sort of thing. And I'm going to multiply both sides of the equation by 10. Now, before I proceed, do you see the advantage of that? And it might not be the thing you did or the way you do it, but can you see where I'm going with this? I'm clearing the fractions, right? So on the left-hand side, when you multiply by 10, and the term is actually dividing by 5, that's going to be multiplying by 2. So on the left, you're going to have 2t. On the right-hand side, we're going to be doing a distributive property. So the 10 is going to get multiplied times the 3 tenths t, and the 10 is going to be multiplied times the 7. Well, the 10 times the 7 is easy. That gives me a 70. Right? And the 10 times the 3 tenths, again, multiplying by 10, dividing by 10, you're going to get canceling right there. And so when you multiply times that term, that's going to amount to being a 3t. And now from here, if I bring the coefficient variable 3t from the right-hand member to the left-hand member by doing the additive inverse, then my final answer is negative t equals 70 out of that. And of course, finally, solving for t, then t is negative 70. Now, when you enter that in the WebAssign box, right? Entering answers in the WebAssign box. Had a few questions about this, right? You get a little box on your WebAssign page, and so all you have to enter in there is the minus 70. That's all you put in the box. You don't want to put the t equals, okay? All that's required is the solution, and not necessary to have an equal sign or a variable included. All right. Um, and if one other thing, if there are multiple answers, then all you do is put a comma, and then you put your additional answers and proceed until you've entered all your solutions. All right. Number two, again, real good success rate here, close to 90%. Factors easily. The questions about The AC method have kind of subsided. People seem to have that method down. Factoring seems to be pretty good for quadratic expressions in particular. And of course, we're going to have a 2y and a y in our lead positions. The signs are both positive, and we're going to load the last positions with a 1 and the 3 like that. And hopefully you can see where the 7 comes from. The outer pair gives me a 6y. The inner pair gives me a 1y. And so we have it factored. Now from here, the concept, of course, is A times B is 0. All right? So if A times B is 0, then one of those terms has got to equal 0. So we have 2y plus 1 equals 0, and we have y plus 3 equals 0. This gives us a solution of y equals negative 3, and this yields a solution of, first of all, 2y equals negative 1, and finally y equals negative 1 half. Right? Now back to the point I just made on exercise number 1. When you go to WebAssign, all right, you can put in decimal equivalents if there is one, right? Repeating decimals, we don't recommend it. But and you can put them in either order, right? So your solution should be negative 1 half, comma, negative 3. And that's it. That's how that's entered into WebAssign. So uh, doing a little math daily, we know that's going to pay off for the fall. And having some experience with WebAssign is going to pay off in the fall, because you will be required to use WebAssign in your Calculus 1, Calculus 2 classes. It's expected that you're using that on a weekly, if not daily basis. All right. Now, number 3, the success rate fell off a little bit on this question right here. And the success rate fell off because you were asked to do it by the complete the square method. And so I want to hit this complete the square method and give you the bullet points on that. And again, that's the kind of thing that we probably should have put in a lead-in video. Okay? Complete the square. It's a technique that mocks the quadratic formula is what it is. And I'll say step 1, you might have seen it differently. Okay? I'm going to say force A to be 1. All right? That's your first bullet point on complete the square. And in this case, right, A is a 1. If it wasn't a 1, if this x squared term had some coefficient other than 1, then the technique to do that is by dividing all terms, right, by A. Okay? So here we had a 1x squared. We have the first requirement. A is a 1. If it wasn't, if it was a 2, we divide everything by 2. If it was a 3, we divide every term by 3. Right? Second bullet point. Remove the C term to the 0 side. And I'm also going to comment and say leave a hole. Okay, leave a hole. And by leave a hole, what I mean there is when you move that 27 in the left-hand member to the right-hand member by additive inverse, make that a plus 27. I'm going to say leave the space where the minus 27 was. And you'll see why I'm recommending that in just a moment. Now, factor, which means make 2 sets of parentheses, okay, by splitting B and keeping the bullet points simple in 2. All right. So now that we have an A value that's 1, the beginning of this factorization is really simple. There's no confusion at all about it. It's going to have to be an X and an X right there. Make sense? And factor by splitting B. B is a plus 12, right? A is 1, B is 12, C is minus 27, the start of this thing. We're going to split the B. So you're going to see a plus 6 here, and you're going to see a plus 6 here. I split it into two equal parts. All right. And of course, by doing that, I force the 12x. And of course, the lead term being an x squared, that was all set up. Now, of course, by doing that, I cause another term, right? We're going to get the 1x squared we planned. We're going to get the 12x in the middle because of the way we're doing this. But we're also causing, right, a plus 36. So I'm going to say we're going to fill that hole, right, with square back. So just keeping it simple, and that's fill the hole. Okay, and I want to say both sides because I can't just add a number to one side of a balance, one side of an equation. I have to also add that 36 over here on the left hand side. And so 27 plus 36 makes 63 over on that side. Now, write it as a square. Write it as a square. In other words, because you've got the same quantity times itself right here, we can rewrite this expression as x plus 6 to the second power equals, again, on the right, make sure you understand why that's a 63 right there. Right? X plus 6 times x plus 6, you multiply something times itself, it's x plus 6 squared. And then on the right hand side, we had 27 plus 36, and that's 63. And finally, finish by square root. Finish by square root. Okay? Which I assume people know how to do. The opposite of squaring something is to square root it. So you do the square root, okay? And square root and the square. So on the left-hand side, we have x plus 6. You do have to remember that because you did that square root, that's a plus or minus square root 63, right? Either one. Got to remember when you perform a square root, you have to identify the plus and minus in there. And then finally, to get the x alone, bring the constant 6 from the left member to the right member. And ordinarily, that's loaded in front, right? So it's going to be minus 6 plus or minus square root 63. Now, as it turns out, the square root of 63 has a perfect square in it. That's square root of 9 times square root of 7, right? Which gives me negative 6 plus or minus 3 radical 7. All fine and good. So here's our answer. In a written form, right, on a written test, there's your answer. On WebAssign, in order to enter that answer, that represents, remember, mathematically, this represents two answers. There's a negative 6 minus 3 square root of 7, and there's another answer, right? Negative 6 plus 3 square root of 7. So in the WebAssign answer box, you need to enter both of those, right, separated by a comma. Doesn't matter which one gets added first, but they each need to be added individually. There's no way in WebAssign to put in a plus minus sign. All right. Now I know it would have helped to have had this information maybe beforehand, and maybe that's what caused some of the problem. And as I said, we regret maybe not putting out a lead-in video to this solving equations, and in particular, the complete the square process. Some students maybe haven't seen this technique, or if they have seen this technique, maybe didn't see it quite this way, or haven't worked in WebAssign. So we're trying to alleviate that now. And again, it pays the dividend in the fall when you're in the know about how to use WebAssign and that sort of thing. All right. So that's question number 3. Um, we'll review that complete the square process. Of course, you can rewatch this video if you need to. Also got number 4 on this page, so we'll hit that now. Got an equation, of course, x squared over x plus 100 equals 50. Again, talk about seeing structure. X cannot be negative 100. You want to get in the good habit of noticing things like that, noticing numbers that cause a problem. And division by 0 is certainly a problem. So, wasn't any requirement in this question. You were merely being asked to solve, but seeing the structure of the problem and being aware of pitfalls and things like that is key. I'm going to think of this as 50 over 1, and then you recognize it as a proportion. So when we cross multiply to solve the proportion, we get x squared equals 50x plus 5,000. Right? Now, from there, standard procedure, get one side to 0. So it's x squared minus 50x um, minus 5,000 equals 0. Okay. And now we got to think about factoring this. Well, seems as though it should be pretty easy, right? X, X. What about the signs that go in those factors? Do you agree they got to be different? Good success rate on this question, right? And then we want a negative 50, so I'm going to use a minus 100, okay? And I'm going to use a plus 50, all right? So we got x plus 50 equals 0, and we've got x minus 100 equals 0. Again, you take each of the factors, since it's equal to 0, you set each of the factors equal to 0. That gives you x equals minus 50. Okay. And this one, of course, gives you x equals positive 100. And if you check those answers, I believe they'll be fine. Um, negative 50 squared divided by 50 is going to turn out to be 50. Okay. And negative 100 squared, rather 100 squared divided by 200 is going to turn out to be 50. So they're both legit answers. And so one last time, in WebAssign, what you want to do, doesn't matter about the order, you want to put a 100, a comma, and a 50, and it will give you a check mark for it being correct. All right? So hope that clears up a few things about WebAssign and also gives some people some information about Complete the Square. Um, check out the other videos for the solutions to the other pretest problems.